morning, everyone. My name is Mary Canty. I'm Assistant Director of Missoula Community Access Television. We're in the MCAT studios this morning to welcome filmmaker Julia Reichert to a documentary production workshop funded by the Montana Arts Council. And those of you who were lucky enough last night to join us at the Crystal Theater saw her new feature film, Emma and Elvis. And it was really a great evening. We had a wonderful time, and we were very glad to see you there, and it was a success for us, so we'd like to do this again in the future. Julia's best known so far for her documentary work, two films, Seeing Reds and Union Maids, both nominated for Academy Awards. She's also a documentary production teacher with Wayne State University in Ohio.
Wright State.
Wright State. So sorry.
Wayne State's in Detroit.
Okay.
These things matter.
Haven't been out that way for a while. So we're going to have a morning session, take a break, and then have another afternoon session, and we'll go ahead and get started. Let's welcome Julia.
Great. Okay. So, well, it's a nice-looking group. Big group. I'm really glad to be here. I'm spending the day talking about my first love, which is documentary production. It's going to be a real treat for me. I haven't actually given this workshop as such before, but don't worry. I have covered all this material before with various, usually it takes 10 weeks, however, so I know you guys are advanced, so we'll try to get it in about 4 hours. I think we can do that, though, right? Now, I guess I want to give sort of an overview of how I see, or at least part of how I see documentary. I want to hear from you guys. I'm going to give you each your 30 seconds to say who you are shortly. We're going to look at a lot of work today. This is partly going to be sort of how-to and partly sort of learning from the experience and drawing out what we can more informally from works that have already been done, and maybe a little bit theoretical. As I see it, I mean, one of the reasons I love documentaries is that I think it combines the skills of two different kinds of people. Okay, good documentary. One is the skill of an investigative reporter, right? That kind of eagerness for all the facts, just the facts, ma'am. Hi, come on in. Have a seat. And you know, that eagerness to get to the bottom of things, to really find out what's the truth here. It takes that kind of skill. And it combines it with the skill of a novelist or a short story writer, right? Someone who can make some kind of magic out of facts, someone who can draw the larger story out, someone who can speak beautifully to people, speak persuasively to people, someone who's artful about what they do. To me, a good documentarian has a balance of those two kind of skills. And I think documentary, which again we're going to spend much of the day really talking about documentary. That's what we're going to focus on, not fiction making so much. Documentary is a very powerful form of expression, a very subtly powerful form of expression. And the subject matter of documentaries, as you all know, can range from very intimately personal subject matters to historically epic. Right? We can see documentaries that are about very exotic, people from foreign lands that we would never get to see. We can also make documentaries about things that happen in our own hometown or in our own family, right? In our own kitchens, in our own backyard. So it covers a vast territory in which people can do a lot of things with documentary. To me, it's a very malleable, incredibly creative medium, and I always try to approach it that way. There's no standards, there's no format. The way there is often in Hollywood-style fiction, certain formats and ways things have to evolve. Not true in documentary. It's totally wide open. It's great. But it has a lot of different purposes. I'm sure some of you have made documentaries that take a stand on issues, right, that are expressing your concern about issues. Another could be exploring the world around you. Another could be exploring yourself, again, in your own world, your own family, whatever, yourself. And as I see it, getting this, you all are, I know, fairly skilled in documentary already, and I think gaining these skills in the electronic age is sort of equivalent to knowing how to just read and write used to be. It's a real basic tool, right? The tool of tool of the electronic age, is the ability to talk about the world around you in pictures and in sound. You can influence people with documentaries. You can, be it, any kind of outward situation of homeless people, the situation of big business, raping the land, conditions in a psychiatric ward, a coal miners' strike. You can actually influence how situations evolve through making documentary. And some of you I know are trying to do that. It also, though, creates a change in the producer. And I always like to sort of take note of that as we're on this journey. See, to me, when you make it, it's like documentary is like getting a passport, right? You make a documentary about something, it's like getting a passport into other people's lives. Situations which you could normally not ever get a chance to go into and get people to talk to you and open up their lives to you. You can do if you have your camera. What are you doing here? Oh, I'm making a film about it. Oh, well, often that just opens all kinds of doors. It's like a passport into all kinds of other worlds. So in a way, it produces a change in you. It tends to force you, right, to open yourself up to all kinds of points of view and all kinds of new experiences. It's a little bit like when you start making a documentary, it's a little bit like taking a journey, right? It's a little bit like you have to have your map, you have to have your preparation, you have to sort of have a sense of where you're going, right? But you have to have planned and so forth, but yet you also have to go out there with a real sense of adventure, right? With a real sense of, in a certain way, once I leave home, almost anything could happen, right? And I want to be open to that. And in some ways, the best documentaries occur where you lose your map or where you go off the map somehow, and where all your careful planning is sort of in the wrong direction, and there's lots of surprises. It's like, I don't know if you've seen the film Harlan County, USA. Some of you might have. A film about a coal miners' strike that a woman named Barbara Koppel made. It's, very well awarded, won the Academy Award, and it's been seen all around the world. And it's a wonderful, stirring film. It's an indictment of the coal companies. It's an exploration into the miners' lives, into their all kinds of conflicts within their, between men and women and so forth. Barbara filmed for a year or more before she really, and filmed and lived in the community and so forth, before she actually found the story, before the story started to evolve. And then she filmed for another year or more. But she was, she followed her instincts, and she had a sense of, again, as a novelist will, and as an investigative reporter will, of what the real story is. And she didn't let it go until she had it. And she had something great then, right? She didn't finish when what she thought was the story was over, right? So I want to stress that to you. Okay, now, typically, we think of documentaries. We think of reality-based pieces of video or film, photographs, whatever. In video, at least, there's a very broad palette, right, of what you could choose from. You have what I use the word actualities. I don't know if this is the word you use too. Real pieces of life as little influence as possible by the effects of the camera. You're filming a demonstration and you're right there and you're shooting it. You're filming people doing something at work. When I say filming, I really mean filming or taping. I tend to say filming because I come out of that, and I apologize. I'll try to remember to say taping. Real stuff going on that's not set up by you, actualities. You have interviews, right, that you can use. You have, graphs, maps, charts, those kind of research materials. You have photographs that you can use. You have archival footage you can use. Voiceover, you have, using people's interviews as a voiceover device. You have narrations. You have sound, which you write yourself or you have somebody else write. Sound effects, music. People often do little reconstructions. I don't know how much that's used out here, but I don't feel as though there's anything non-documentary about perhaps restaging something at times, doing a dramatic reconstruction about the maker, coming up with a creative idea and inserting it into a piece that's a mostly documentary piece. You have all of these. Very broad palette, which is partly what makes documentary exciting to me. Now, I know I assume that you all are makers, is that right? You all are people who are producers already. No.
Wannabes.
Well, wannabes, okay. Well, I sort of assumed most people were makers. When we go around, I'd like to find, and we'll do in a couple minutes, I would like to find out, you know, sort of your name. I mean, for one thing, that's nice for you all to know each other's names, because you all live here, and hopefully you will begin to network with each other. And if you're working on a project, you know, what it is in very brief form, because there's a lot of you. And if you're not, and you're just wanting to learn, great, just say that. Okay, I'd like to know sort of at what level you are. That would be helpful. But anyway, don't worry about that yet. I'm assuming that most of you are makers, and I'm sort of talking as such, that you already know something about documentary, and we're going to sort of take it a step. If there's certain things that I feel like we really need to go back to the basics, I will. If there's enough people who are really beginners, that's fine. What I want to do first, I just thought to sort of get us in gear here, I would show a 14-minute documentary that was made in Ohio, actually made by young people, by students. It's a filmed documentary. It's called If It Bleeds, It Leads. Anybody can guess what it's about? What do you think?
KECI News.
What's that?
The KECI News.
There you go. It's about local news gathering and broadcasting. Okay. And look at it closely. I don't know about you, but whenever I watch a film, I always am taking notes on structure and how it works and all that. We're going to actually use this piece later when we talk about structuring. We're going to use this as an example. And we'll sort of dissect the structure of it. Here we get to see if our video stuff works. Can we get lights down or off or whatever?
This is 25 News Midday. Joe Smith with sports and the weather scene forecast. Now, Barbara Kerr.
Good afternoon and welcome to 22 Alive News Midday for a Monday. Dayton police say charges will be filed in an accident this morning that left one woman hospitalized. Police say a man driving a pickup truck struck a Toyota headed east on Three Pipes.
A tragic accident this afternoon took the life of a young man.
A Dayton man was shot to death today, and police are trying to find out who
Before
did
the
it.
mother could stop, she had run over the girl. Both were taken to Good
Car
Samaritan.
lost control and slammed into an
The
apartment building.
79-year-old wife was found dead on the living room floor. The unofficial cause of death is strangulation. I really began thinking about it a couple years ago when Channel 7 here in town had and aired videotape of a shooting at Duffers Bar. A man had been in there wielding a gun. There was a police standoff, and the man was shot to death. It so happened that a Channel 7 photographer was on his way home, I believe, 'cause it's right near the station, and was there with his camera and started rolling and had it all, including the moment the man died. Well, there was a lot of hoopla. They took a lot of phone calls. They took a lot of criticism. But it occurred to me at that time that maybe we're doing things backwards. I mean, we show all these shows on TV, Miami Vice, Hill Street Blues, Bang Bang, Shoot 'em Up, Violence, nobody thinks a word about it. But suddenly, show something real, and people go, oh, you can't show that, I don't want to see that. Maybe we're doing it backwards. Maybe we're not getting across the point that in real life, real people get hurt, real people bleed, real people die.
Yes, real people die every day. And every day, TV news is there. Out of all the events that occur in a day, what do personal tragedies qualify as news? Are we being informed, or is television just giving us a chance to gather at the scene of an accident and stare at the victim?
The viewfinder puts me in the world of just being a television maker, and I make sure things look good in the viewer, whether it's horrifying or not, whether it has the correct...
Richard Penner is a videographer in Dayton, Ohio.
With keeping the environment under control, keeping the camera under control, and making sure the equipment is functioning properly, I have a lot to think about. I really don't think about all the urgency in front of me, except how do I capture that? there is some kind of energy that you carry around all day to get you to the scene first. What we shoot is usually fast, sweet, and sometimes it's just like hamburger. You know, it's a meat market. You just cut, 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 bang, 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 it's done. In this town, it's hard to fill up a half an hour or an hour. And if they have a car accident where someone is trapped, instantly good visuals. And it cuts up the program.
Dayton police say charges will be filed in an accident this morning that left one woman hospitalized. It happened about 8 a.m. Police say a man driving a pickup truck was traveling west on Free Pike when he tried to turn left onto Gettysburg. He struck a Toyota headed east on
We do an awful lot of car accidents, which could be considered exploitive in the sense that they're people's lives that we're touching when they don't need to be touched.
The investigation is continuing.
How do you decide what you broadcast on the news?
You have to be responsible, you have to be objective, and you have to be sensitive.
Johnny Walker is news director at Channel 22.
You try not to show carnage, you try not to show a dead body unless it's totally relevant to the story itself. You hope you maintain sensitivity. That's a good thought to keep in our minds, that we hope that we aren't desensitized. But that can happen probably after a long period of time, after you deal with this sort of thing on a daily basis.
The Dayton audience has an attitude that if there's a fire or a car accident or something involves the local police probe here in court, that it's newsworthy. If Burns bleeds or pleads, it'll be the lead. They may have somebody trapped in a car because they happen to run off the road and they're not hurt, but they can't get their door open. And that's not news. But if the car is flipped over and it's on its top and there's serious injuries, well, it's time to get there. And I don't know if it really affects anyone. I think the worst thing about showing it is that people become desensitized to it. They think it's almost like another cop show. You have to get them turned on. You have to do something to motivate them, or they're not going to turn you on the next night. If they don't turn you on the next night, they don't bring in the dollars for those commercials, and you're out of a job. I'm out of a job.
When you come out of school, many times, you have this, image in your mind, which is a good one, that you're a journalist, and to hell with commercials. We don't care if anybody watches or not, but that's wonderful. That's a wonderful attitude, but that only works for public TV.
Is it spring or is it summer? One thing's for sure, the weather's no bummer.
If we want to get getting a larger audience each time the rating book came out, then first of all, I would be in trouble. My job would be in jeopardy. The people then who work in my department would be in jeopardy. Because we'd think, well, what are we doing wrong? Now, why aren't they watching this newscast? Then we go to a research company and find out what people want. You do all those things because you have to survive. You have to have a certain rating and an audience to sell commercials. And if you don't do that, you can't present a newscast.
As more people watch a news show, ratings go up, and a station can make more money. But what happens to us? What happens when accidents and fires and violent acts are put into neat slots and packaging? Does tragedy become trivial? Does suffering become entertainment? Those in TV news pride themselves on their work. They give each other awards, and stories of suicides, murders, and fires often emerge as winners. Barbara Kerr and Richard Penner both worked on the award-winning Caesars Creek story.
As I recall, we were leaving, I think it was a county commission meeting, and Bruce Parker, our executive producer, got in the two-way radio and said, quick, I need a landline call. What that meant was he wanted a phone call because he had some information he wanted to give us that he didn't want to air over the two-way radio so the other stations might pick up on it. So we went to the nearest payphone. I called up. He said, look, get down to Caesar's Creek. I think we have a drowning.
We're gonna close the beach. No one's gonna go back and swimming. The area's gonna be closed.
The sky had been overcast much of the day, but the brief storm was still a surprise. As the lightning and rain moved through, two young girls, part of a youth outing from Georgia, were playing with an inner tube about 25 feet from shore. Suddenly, they slipped through the inner tube into the choppy water. I knew we had the natural sound. I knew we had the facts of what had happened. What we didn't have was somebody who was there. There was a woman, though, whose daughter had helped to save one of the victims. She was upset by what had happened. She heard over what had happened. I thought, boy, if we could get her to talk to us. So I went to her very quietly and said, look, I would never insist. I said, but you're the one person I've talked to who was here when it happened, who I think could help people understand what happened and what it really means if you'd be kind enough to talk to us. And that was the final element. That was what this story needed to make a story that people are going to remember.
There was a kid, I don't even know where he's at now. He was out there with her. Well, they both went under to get her. And they got one of them up and the other one they didn't.
You kept the camera on the woman.
Until she had tears in her eyes. Yep, yes, that was a conscious decision. I guess depending on your viewpoint, you might look at it as exploiting her, but I simply felt here was a woman who had been there the whole time and obviously felt very moved by what had happened. A little girl died out there. This is not a happy, pretty story. A little girl died, and it happens sometimes. 7 years old, out in an outing.
It's reality. It's a situation that's news. There's a drowning today at Caesar Creek. That's news. That is, everybody had that story that day. That story that day, we were the only camera there. It happened. The helicopter was circling, and the frogmen were in the water. And when it was realized that the person was dead, whoever the person was, the sister or the friend, had an emotional reaction. That's it. That's reality. That's the story. If I were involved in that story, I would not appreciate that it was on the air. If I would have been standing there and it would have been my child. But at the same time, I guess I would understand that that's part of his job.
What made it a good story? You had an event which by its nature was tragic.
It had the atmosphere of the day, had the people, it had natural sound that had urgency in it.
I thought the writing was good, if I do say so myself. It was clear and simple.
And it had chronological build-up to the event. It had all the necessary pictures.
You can't separate any of these. They all had to come together. That, to me, is what makes a really superlative story that stands out that you remember for a long time.
We're gonna close the beach. No one's gonna go back and swimming. The area's gonna be closed.
The sky had been overcast much of the day, but the brief storm was still a surprise. As the lightning and rain moved through, two young girls, part of a youth outing from Georgia, were playing with an inner tube about 25 feet from shore. Suddenly, they slipped through the inner tube into the choppy water.
The storm started up, and before anybody could get out there, the inner tube just went out, and my daughter went out to get them. She got one of them back up on the inner tube. There was a kid, I don't even know where he's at now. He was out there with her. Well, they both went under to get her, and they got one of them up, and the other one they didn't.
For an hour and a half, divers and rescue crews searched the waters while care flight patrolled in the sky, and bystanders watched anxiously from shore. Suddenly, hoping for for a miracle, medic crews worked feverishly to try to revive the 7-year-old girl. The water had been cold, but was it cold enough to send her into shock, stopping her breathing? Tragically, the answer was no. Despite frantic efforts by Care Flight and Children's Medical Center, the child died. Barbara Kerr, 22 Alive News.
Do we need to see that?
No, I suppose you don't need to. You didn't really perhaps need to know that it happened, but it did happen. And you remembered it, didn't you? It wasn't just another piece of news that came across the wire and you forgot about it in 15 minutes. You remembered it. So perhaps that's the way I justify it. Turn on the camera. Turn the camera again. Are you rolling? Okay. So let me ask you a question. When you put this together, what are you going to use? You're going to use the best stuff I say, aren't you? You're going to use sometimes the most emotional things that I have to say. The best video. That's what you're going to use. And we do it too.
Okay. Good. Actually, wonderful. Somebody who knows this better can do this. I'd like to rewind it at the beginning. If somebody can just watch that and maybe pop it out, and then the next one that goes in. You gonna do that, Randy? Sure. Is this one? You know, by the way, I was thinking about this. I think if, in case for the production of this piece, if this is going to be useful, possibly this documentary workshop, I know you can use this, the piece we just saw. You can have it and dub it and so forth. And I'll have to think about, and most of the others that I've made you can. There's one that I'm not sure about. In fact, the next one, you know, because it was given to me by the individual, and I don't know if how he would feel about it. But if you want them, I can make a call and find out. Okay? If it bleeds, it leads. What'd you think?
Good work.
It's good, huh? Made by, you know, a bunch of 20-year-olds who worked very hard. They made it in 3 months.
That was film?
It was film. They did it all in 16, and it was their first documentary. They had a great subject, you know, and they had the right materials to make it work. I was wondering, what do you see as this? I think every time you see a documentary, including your own, you need to ask a few questions about it. One is, well, what is it about? So what's this one about?
Exploitation of people on the news, exploiting people for news stories.
Well, you could say what it's about is local television news gathering. In terms of just plain old text, it's about local television news gathering. Now, in terms of subtext, what is it saying about that? You're right. I mean, one of the things it's saying is that it's raising the question, are people being exploited? I want to try. Yeah, there's enough noise in here already. Thanks, Randy. So that's part of the subtext. What else?
About money.
Yeah. Why? That's partly the why question. Well, if there might be this question of exploitation, why would they do it? Right, that's part of the subtext. There's even a bigger question, though. I always look at sort of what is a documentary, what does any piece of art say to us about the human condition, about what it means to be human, right, about our own lives. Yeah. Did you?
Seems that part of it was, or a big part of it is that the only thing that's newsworthy is life and death.
And is that what that it raises a lot of questions for us, the viewer. Is that what we think is correct, right? Yeah. There's something more that I know, I always think about when I see this, another sort of question underneath the text.
I mean, there's a question that it raised for me that it doesn't answer, that I wish, you know, that's probably a whole nother film, but I mean, why are we drawn to this? I mean, they go to this, this outfit that consults and tells them what they need to do, and this outfit tells them they need more of this, what is it, bleed, plead, and burn.
If it burns, bleeds, or pleads, it'll be the lead.
Yeah. But why are we drawn to that?
Yeah. Well, I think it is asking that question. I think it forces us to think, well, when we see this stuff, I mean, in a way, when you turn on the tube and you see a house burning or a woman screaming because her kid was just killed. I mean, we watch it, right? Why are we drawn to that? I mean, some of us don't, but if you do, I mean, and I think it also raises the question of what effect does this kind of, seeing this as news, which I think increasingly in this decade it's being seen as that's what news is all about. How does that affect us? How does that affect our consciousness as a people, right? It's raising that question. And I think that's where it gets on the level of sort of what does it mean to be us, humans. I always think it's a really good question to ask of documentaries. And almost all the great ones you've ever seen, if you think about it, shed some light on something about what it means to be human, what it means to be us. And this is one of those that obviously asks, it's only 14 minutes long, so it raises, I think in a very yeasty sort of way, it raises a lot of questions. And but let me ask you, in terms of raising questions, now obviously you would say this is a piece that has more than one point of view expressed in the piece, right? Wouldn't you say? I mean, there's not just one point of view. There's kind of conflicting points of view, actually, that are expressed by the way the piece is edited, right? And to some degree expressed by the narrations, which are the voice of the makers, right? Now, do you feel as though both sides of this conflict are really heard? You feel like you've heard from the news gatherers, they've had a chance to have their say, and so it's fair in that way, right? Which I would agree with you. I think this piece is...
Not until the close, though.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
You know, not until that very last line when she says, we're going to do the same thing here. You're going to use the best shots, the most exciting, the interviews and the narration, and are we that different?
And what do you think that, and that's a very stunning little piece, isn't it? But what do you think, what effect does that have on the overall piece?
It adds another layer to the analysis.
Yeah, it really does.
Because all of a sudden, yeah, they've become, just by the act of doing what they're doing, much more like the people that I actually feel like they're critical of. See, I feel in the point of view, they really are critical. I mean, they have the shot of his gold rings on his hands. And,
right.
You know, they definitely took a point of view. In my opinion, I didn't think they were fair. I thought it was an issue, you know, I thought right off the bat that
Well, there's a difference. I think you can be fair and also have a point of view. In fact, I think good documentaries are both fair and take a point of view.
Yeah.
In other words, I think the news gatherers are allowed to talk at length and to justify their point of view. They're asked good questions, solid questions, and they're given plenty of time to give their point of view. The filmmakers also, through the narration and the way they've edited, they have their point of view, which gets expressed. I think I sort of think it's balanced, yet I think there's a very strong point of view, which is really raising very grave doubts about this form of news gathering. I think what the ending does is even something one step further than that. See, I feel as though what they're doing there is they are letting you, the audience, know that that's what the process is. Whereas when you sit down and watch the news is not doing that. The news is presenting as if this is reality. Exactly what he says. This is reality. This was the important thing that happened today. They don't stop and they don't ever let you see that, well, the reason we did it is because, well, it's easy to get this kind of news, right? The ratings tell us we'll make more money if we get this kind of... I mean, they don't reveal to you their inner workings in the way that the filmmakers actually did reveal to you some of their inner workings there at the end, which I think is great. I mean, I always think that there are opportunities for the makers to sort of reveal their methods and reveal who they are, that's positive.
Well, furthermore, doesn't it make it much more complex because it much more indicts the audience than it does even the people that they're interviewing, because everybody is catering to an audience, and I think it underscores that point.
Yeah, it makes us stop and think, well, is this really what I want to see? Is this true that, yeah. I think that's a good point. So, anyway, I don't want to, we could talk about this film for a lot. We are going to see at least part of it again in a little bit. I'd like to spend, this is the few minutes I'd like to spend on finding out who you guys are before we barrel ahead further here. So, I'm going to take a few quick notes. I know there's just a ton of you here, but I think I'd like to have you each give us, now I'd like you to try to be very strict with yourself and try to just take like no more than 30 seconds. I know it seems hard, but tell us your name and where you're from, and whatever else you think is significant. If you're a producer, or the kind of work you do. If you're a student, where you go to school. If you're an MCAT staff person, say that. You know, something that was relevant to why you're here. Okay, and it would be helpful perhaps to me. if you produce environmental work, if you produce personal work, if you produce experimental work or feminist work, you know, you might just let us know that. Okay? Or if you don't produce any work, that's okay too. Why don't you start?
I'm Joan Seifert Ryman, and I have produced one tape for a promotion for Food Bank. And I'm interested in doing more, but I haven't done anything yet.
Okay.
Will Snodgrass, I'm producing environmental videos. I have a series on here, it's sporadically aired, it's called Your Environment, and my area of interest is toxic chemicals and corrupt politics.
Great. By the way, where's the juice?
No, I'll go get it.
Oh, thanks, Mary. Okay, great.
I'm Maureen Folsom, and I've assisted Will in doing some of the video work that he does with camera work and some of the editing.
Oh, great, okay. Do you want to just actually stand up? I'm sorry, would you mind just standing up so people can, and say your name? I just realized I can see you, but there's so many of you. And say your name again, please.
I'm Maureen Folsom.
And you heard what she does, right? If you could just stand, this is awkward, but then everybody can see who you are and say what you have to say, okay? This is a friendly crowd.
I'm Kathy Crane. I go to the university and I haven't produced anything yet, but I'm thinking about it. So
You're at this university here in Missoula?
Yeah.
Yeah. Studying?
Oh, liberal arts.
Liberal arts, okay, great.
I'm Todd Williams, and I'm a student also, English major. I also haven't produced anything.
I'm Pete Talbot. I do film and video production, mostly commercials, industrials, some network programming, syndicated stuff. And the reason I'm in that is so I don't have to get up in front of people like this. I'm on the other side of the camera.
So you work in the business then?
Yeah, I started out doing that,
Right.
TV news, shooting 16 mil for the local TV stations.
Right.
Got out pretty quick.
Bruce Whitey, producer, writer, just finished a educational piece on wolf identification, and then Lori and I finished up the Wolf Thriller Imagine, which hopefully will be part of a series, Animals of the Mind. Has to do with animals in mythology.
You produce on video?
Right.
My name is Carrie Hinkle, and I work here at MCAT, and also I'm a producer, and I specialize in music videos, and I'm working on a documentary about teens, and so this is very interesting and helpful to me. My first documentary.
Good stuff. And I'm Randy Ammon, we're staff here at MCAT, and as such, much more of a facilitator than a producer. Like all the staff here have a video production background and love video production, and one of these years we're going to get a slow week and I'm going to edit this
I'm Mary Canty. I'm on staff here at MCAT. I also have background in independent video production, primarily a little bit of film work in non-commercial public interest television.
I'm Kathy Witkowski, and I'm a 10 years freelance journalist. Now I'm an MFA student at the university, and Lori and I are going to be co-producing a documentary about the Italian internees at Fort Missoula. We just found out that we got some funding from Montana Community for the Humanities for that. So.
Whoa, wait a second, Italian internees?
Mm-hmm. During World War II.
Italians?
Mm-hmm.
Not just Japanese?
Italian civilians and some Italian Americans.
This is unbelievable. Great subject. Right away, we all want to know about this, right?
I'm Pam Curtis. I'm a student at the U of M, and I haven't produced anything either.
I'm Jean Curtis. I've mostly just taped workshops so far, but I'm interested in documentary.
I'm Erica Fredrickson, and I've been involved in productions here at MCAT. I'm just interested in learning about documentaries.
Great.
And I'm Mike Fredrickson, and I'm working on a piece on right now on special services in public schools.
Special services?
Yeah, special vocational programs. Right.
Ah, okay. And you work for the schools?
Pardon?
Do you work for the
Yeah.
schools? Okay, great.
I'm Vivian Garrett, and I'm a volunteer here at MCAT, and I work at, I'm a job trainer at Sentinel High School, and I've already produced a training film on vocational training.
Marlene Jenkins, I'm a TV production student at the university.
Paul Guillemette, a sculptor here in Missoula looking to expand my media.
So you're a novice?
Yes.
Is that right?
I'm Bridget Boylan, and I'm a graduate from Carroll College in writing. I'm a freelance writer and working on a project up in Glacier Park starting this month, a book project. So I'm always looking for new projects.
Okay. I'm Lynn Merrick. I live outside of Bozeman, and will be teaching film theory at MSU and independent filmmaker when I can find the funds.
Yes. I'm Todd Stewart. I'm a film student at Bozeman, and I do have one AIDS project under my belt. Showed on PBS once, so twice.
I'm Karen Sexton. I'm a film student at Bozeman. My main area of interest is experimental animation, but documentary and freelance kind of go hand in hand, so that's why I'm here.
I'm Kara Johnson, and I'm a new person in the community, having come from Vermont. And I worked with Jay Craven there a little bit on a couple of his film projects.
I'm Bill Hale. I'm from the Flathead Valley. We operate the cable access channel in Libya and in the Flathead Valley, and we've been in production, I guess, for about 10 years, and we're doing quite a bit of local origination production now, and we just keep those two channels on the air. Hopefully, we'll be covering the full northwest corner of Montana, which is the 4 counties in northwest Montana. And our call letters are NCTV, Northwest Community TV, and we're using MCAT down here as a sort of a way to see how things are done and getting some ideas from them. So it's good to be here
Great.
today.
Thank you.
I'm Randy Yearout. I'm a musician and an electronics technician and videographer, and I produce videos for NCTV with Bill.
I'm Michael Reagan. I work at Missoula Independent, journalist. I used to work as a screenwriter in Hollywood, and I'm recovered now.
I'm Gabrielle Tolliver. I'm a feature writer at The Independent.
My name's Gwen, and I just dabble in video.
Okay.
My name is Rich Doyle, and I've been having a fun time down here at MCAT. Gwen works with me. We have a weekly TV show that's, I want to try and get more help from the community. We try and stick to ecological themes, and then I'm trying to create a new TV show that will be live, absolutely live on this channel, and looking for help for the crew, and it'll be like Saturday Night Live format, full of satire and live music and a host. And in this town, I think it would work.
I'm Lynn Brumley, and I'm a photographer, and I'm working on an environmental documentary.
I'm Terry Jimerson, and I got involved in video down here at MCAT when the station started. So I've done several little documentaries, and I like that, although I don't want to make that everything that I do either.
Katrina Rowan, I'm the director for Very Special Arts Montana, and I'm doing some work with Terry, and I'm finding myself so intrigued I want to do more.
I'm Mike Fellows. I've produced several programs that we had a live labor call-in show, and I do mostly labor shows, and I do some healthcare things too, working on some guerrilla media and things of that nature.
Great.
I'm Mark Salmonson. I'm a RTV student. Haven't produced anything as of yet, but right now I'm working on a comedy type thing, a little bit like what you're working on.
Okay. So did everyone speak?
The camera
Except
people are
the
both-
dudes on camera, yeah. They're both, go ahead, sorry.
Lori, introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Lori Hudak. I'm part of the MCAT staff, and I also am doing a couple documentaries with Kathy and Bruce, who already spoke. And I distribute Montana production, so if anybody's interested, let me know.
Good.
Neil Leathers, I do a weekly show, doesn't have much documentary about it. Trying to get together a show that sounds a lot like what you were talking about, trying to get some local talent in and do sort of a weekly maybe skit show or monthly skit show, something like that. Give the university a little more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good, there's a real broad range of people's experiences and interests here, which is kind of neat. I just want to say that one of the functions that a gathering like this can serve for you guys is for you guys to get to know each other and maybe find that, hey, you know, you might be interested in talking to this person, and there's a lunch break and there's afterwards, and So it can really be a nice little stimulus to production activity and just plain having fun in your community. So seize the day. Okay, moving right along. I mentioned before documentaries can be, again, incredibly flexible, creative medium. We looked at a film just now, If It Bleeds, It Leads, which is on an issue, which really explores an issue, raises questions, is kind of on that investigative documentary, a little more, uses interviews, sit-down interviews, uses actualities, takes stuff off of TV. Actualities, by that I mean a perfect example of an actuality is the videographer arriving on the scene, observing the scene, getting the shots. That's a little actuality block right there. That's what I mean by actualities. It uses some facts and figures. Anyway, it uses a lot of different things. Okay, this piece is not on it's not primarily on an issue. I was just wondering about the placement of this monitor for you guys, because
It's pretty good, actually.
is it really?
Kind of move, I can see, yeah.
How is it for? I wasn't sure if we should move it more centrally, perhaps. How is it for you guys over here?
Fine.
It's okay. Okay, so I shouldn't have moved it. How's this going to be for you guys? It'll be okay. Good. This is a much more experimental piece. It's also, I would say, is a documentary. And it's based on real stuff. It's called Glass Jaw. It was also made by a student. Oh, I wanted to show you work that is made by people who are not highly advanced, at least at first, because I think it gives you, encouragement about what can be done. There are a few unique things. This is made by a 26, 27-year-old student in Philadelphia. I happened to see it at a film festival that I was a judge for, and this won the top prize of the entire festival, even though there was, there were pieces made by people who had lots more money and lots more experience than this person. I said it actually is in the New York Film Festival this year. Completely amazingly. They now have a video section, by the way, the New York Film Festival.
Was it shot in video?
First year. Well, not only was it shot in video, it was shot in pixel vision. Do you all know what pixel vision is?
No.
I don't know if I can, is any of you who are on staff able to exactly say what pixel vision is? I know it's a real, extremely low-end black and white video made by Mattel Toys, I think, right? Something like that.
Fisher Price.
Fisher Price, sorry.
Really?
Fisher Price, they were like about $100. They have a very unique look.
Well, if anyone saw the program that's been running this week called MCAT Dream, I Eat, Sleep, Drink, MCAT. That Wendy Curran shot that, her little siblings, Fisher Price, Pixel Vision.
Fisher Price, yeah, it was very, very cheap, low end. And actually, I understand they Fisher Price stopped producing them pretty quickly.
They did.
And artists, started discovering them and doing interesting things
Well,
with
they
this
only
Pixel
run
Vision.
for a few minutes. That was the problem with on battery or whatever.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, they are only
They had
good
problems.
for 10 minutes, yeah.
But, so it's Pixel Vision, and all the sound was done on a Mattel, some kind of little Casio type of thing. All the sound. And the person is actually also a composer. This young guy also composes. So I wanted you to know that. It's about 10, I think it's like 10 minutes long. And I also wanted to tell you that it's, the person who made the piece was beaten very badly. And within an inch of his life kind of thing. And this piece was made as he was recovering, I guess you could say. I think it's okay to tell you that. Okay. Ready? I think I remember this. Glass jaw. Oh gosh.
We'll clean that during the break.
That's shocking. This is black and white, so you don't see it more.
You can close that door. Very close.
Is it happening? No. Notice the writing, I'll say that one more thing, in this one. Pixel Vision.
I'm shaking. They don't give you blankets in the emergency room, oddly. Sitting in my blood-soaked boxers, I try not to sound like a speak and spell when they ask me my name. My head is spinning. I am hearing voices, and I'm hearing parts of voices, separated as high and low frequencies. I think that in the corner there is a radio playing low, a call-in talk show. My request to have it turned off is met with chuckling, and I realize I'm hallucinating. The lack of feeling in my chin and head soon becomes apparent. Just born continents of numbness, separated only by a sea of skull, peppered occasionally by the tingle and flash of what I imagine to be the volcanic activity of their afterbirth. I look like a baseball half stitched up. I can't call up words as quickly. When I speak, extra syllables jump into words when I least expect it. If I close my eyes and concentrate, I can say each word perfectly, but I sound like a robot or an elf. It's easier to do imitation voices than to speak haltingly like myself. Years ago, a man came up to me waiting for the subway in London, just out of the hospital. His face was bright red. He pointed to my bandage, oversized for such a small corneal scratch, and then indicated the evidence of his own mishaps. In the center of his neck, the small hole of a tracheotomy puckered in and out to a rhythm other than his words of explanation. He pointed to the pieces of coat hanger thin wire that came directly out of his forehead.
The wires
He
are
explained.
used to anchor the head and ensure there is absolutely no movement in spine-severing injuries. It's known as a halo. Someone up there likes
He
me.
concluded, smiling like an angel. I'd imagine they must, I replied. His eyes widened at the sound of my voice.
You're a Yank, aren't you?
And before I could nod, he'd fled the platform. To my left, a man in a bowler states,
They say only the most civilized countries have a national healthcare
the
system.
telltale yellow of the Financial Times peeking out from under his arm.
Damn colonials.
Another sputters. I think of Michael from work. He lives in the country now. One night over after work beers, we find we share the same fear. The fear of losing a limb or a sense, and ultimately our independence. 10 days later, his jaw will be broken in 5 places after being beaten on a late-night street. He will lose his sense of smell. I write to tell him my news. He called me back. We trade blender recipes and laugh that our most asked questions are the same. How do you eat? How much longer? Does it hurt? We talk about the hospital bill. I had 38 staples in my head, so that puts the bill at a little over $1,000 a staple.
You better not go shopping at that office supply store anymore.
How can he not be bitter?
Not the government.
The broken bone, the stitch, the staple, and the brace are my initiation into the adult world of legal terms, hospital words, and criminal charges. Everyone asks if they got the guy who did it, if I can sue him, if he's going to pay any of the medical bills. Questions I routinely ask myself as if they matter, because I find they just don't. It just doesn't work that way. I get $205 a month welfare and $100 a month food stamps. Without insurance, I am grateful that medical assistance pays my hospital bills, although the hospital keeps sending the bills to my house. Do they think I have $1,000 bonds I can just cash to pay for this? My landlord waives my rent for the 2 months I convalesce at my mom's. I think of Louis Braille blinded accidentally by an awl in his father's workshop. My thinking is like Braille in butter. When I try to put my finger on the characters of the thoughts, they meld with the soft palate from which they are formed. I'm making a new hole in my belly. A woman I meet asks me if I've lost any weight with my jaw wired shut. About 25 pounds, I say.
I would kill for a broken jaw.
He says, gripping my arm, eyes shining.
I wonder if she'd want the hole in my head, too.
You wouldn't be able to do any French kissing.
No cunnilingus either, I think.
I'm telling you, it's not like that. You have to do it by any means.
I miss most what no kid would believe. Being able to brush my teeth. My breath is worse than old, dead men. I feel like I have stalactites growing from the roof of my mouth. These braces bite into my gums when I try to talk. Cankers fester where the little hooks bite into the soft skin on the inside of my cheek. This tissue is easily fooled by this dentist-given cocaine paste. Like a dull and stupid child lulled into sleep. No protest. Membranes have exchanged these with an invertebrate sense of pain. And bits of food from the shake I last made hide in micro work like jellyfish and particles on a jetty at low tide. The surgeon and nurse come by to check me out. The nurse is a man with unskilled hands, the surgeon too busy to really care. I tried to tell that old riddle about the father and son involved in a car accident. The father is killed, the son requires brain surgery. The brain surgeon, upon seeing the boy, declares, "I can't operate on this boy, he's my son." But my brain surgeon is out the door before I can finish. Must be my delivery. Or maybe she's heard that one. It's this drug that's making me hallucinate these voices. It's supposed to prevent seizures, but instead I am hearing the voice of the Fly. From the movie The Fly, the original Fly, with Vincent Price. It's saying over and over. And then I'm hearing the voice of an old woman.
Help me, doctor. Doctor, please help me.
Just an allergic reaction, I'm told. Bridget lightly kisses my shattered jaw. I can't tell the difference between the smell of her perfume and the remnants of anesthesia in the air of all hospitals. I'm confused and afraid. It's time to go. They wheel me out. I can't move my head. My body is strapped to the gurney. Somebody is rummaging through cabinets in the operating room for something. It sounds like pots and pans being looked through in a kitchen. After a minute or two, I'm convinced they are looking for a spaghetti colander. I am cheered by the thought that once I'm put under, the next thing I'll know will be coming to. I wonder if I'll know anything if I die. The anesthesiologist puts a small plastic thing on my middle finger. It starts chirping like an electronic bird.
This device measures the oxygen in your bloodstream.
It tells me.
The more it chirps, the better off you are.
Just like a canary in a coal mine, I think to myself. The birds would stop chirping and die in the presence of poison gas, and the miners know to flee to higher ground. Maybe that's why the inventor gave the device the voice of a bird. Hard and dreamless, the mask is lowered. I draw myself up to the corner of my eye and wait.
A mandibular arch bar was then leading to the dentition, using both number 26 gauge stainless steel ligation wire.
I come to, ecstatic just to be alive. I'm so glad I didn't die. I am wheeled to the ICU with an ear-to-ear grin. The ICU echoes with the shouts of the nurses in the cubicles of adjacent patients. Do you know where you are? Can you tell us what happened? A moan or the gurgle and hiss of medical machinery, the only response. The nurses are surprised to have a conscious patient. They are exceptionally nice. They all poke their heads in to say hi. They're not used to TV watching, conversation carrying, coffee straw drinking patients. The first night after the surgery, I was happy just to fill my lungs with oxygen. The nurses would wake me every 2 hours and give me a quiet quiz. Where are you? How did you get here? Do you know who the president is? The first nurse and I started talking. She said, "You know you're very lucky." And I said, "I know." And immediately I was choked up. I think she saw this because she steered the conversation into small talk. When I was first brought into the ICU, There was a man that I had heard mentioned. He was hit by a Mack truck while changing a tire on the Schuylkill Expressway. He had gone into surgery the same time as me. I asked about him as if asking were enough to provide him with a transfusion of my healthy, overflowing oxygen feeling. He was dead, the nurse said. And after she had gone, I cried and cried for this guy I didn't know. I knew that this sobbing was coming out of me, but I didn't know why. I didn't know why. It was as if something propelled me forward to ask that question. Something took over, knowing full well what the answer would be. It was as if I was following the script of some MASH episode. I'm the guy who's brought in, found wounded, screaming in a foxhole. And from my mesh bed, I tell Hawkeye.
I tell you, Doc, it was weird. It was really weird. I heard this screaming, this terrible high screaming, and then I realized it was me. It was coming from my own mouth.
And BJ smiles at me and tells me, "You'll be all right now." And I ask,
"Say, how's my buddy? How's my buddy?"
And BJ and Hawkeye just look at each other. That look that says someone has died. These shapes and shadows have no context without motion, and little content with. I've lost my glasses, but they seem to be people walking back and forth. We are all of us shadows living in the shadow of the new millennium. We are almost at the pivot, the crux, the great hinge upon which will turn our sense into the light, and with light change. Something is going to change. I think of the people who don't qualify for medical assistance, but can't afford private insurance, who just want to stay well, who want preventative care. I think of the victims of accidents, and the fact that they have to be lucky enough to get hurt badly enough to get help from the state, and I know that something will change. This pivot is but one cog in a series of gears that, when empowered, will land bone-breaking blows. At the very heart of this vortex is a child's wind-up toy. Within the head of this monster, there is a fierce and tiny dynamo, a gaping maw out of which issues death's own breath, hot gases and fiery sparks, the smell of decaying food trapped between rotting teeth. I can make out the mesh of the gears when they stop, but it does not stop. In your face, relentless and loud. And it feels like a never-ending night. Like the memory of New Year's Eve, when you were 10, and you could count on your thumbs the number of times you'd stayed out past 2 a.m., watching the fireworks, sitting on the grass. And you're cold, and it's high July, and you don't remember where you were going, or what year it is, or what happened. All you can remember to tell the police is a dog tag mailing label bite of information. And you recite your name, address, phone, and social security number like you were typing the information on a tax form. Feeling good in the fact that you can at least remember that, and wondering out loud in the back of the squad car why Gilligan could never remember who he was after being popped on the head with just a coconut. There is no pain, just confusion.
Substation.
So did that, how'd you feel about that? It's a strong piece, I think. Do you think it's strong?
Certainly gives you the feeling of what it's like to be seriously injured.
And not know if you're going to live a few minutes and hallucinating. I think it really gives you an inside view of what it means to just be out of touch with reality, mostly.
Yeah.
And that's the real gift, that's, for me at least, part of the real gift of this piece.
Head injuries.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
also really brings in, along with all those aspects, the reality of living after something like that happens.
Cutting the fruit,
Well, just
the
really,
blender,
yeah.
the typewriter.
His, you know, problems with his income, all that
His
kind
money,
of stuff.
exactly, yeah. It's quite layered, this piece. It's really an intense 12, 15 minutes, whatever it is, yeah.
Was he a filmmaker before the accident?
He's a student, and I also, on the same tape, if you'd be curious, are the 2 or 3 little student exercises he did. He didn't do this for class. I mean, he was obviously not in school while he was doing this. So he was not a filmmaker. He was, you know, a first-year student. Of film, in video. He was a first-year student in video, yeah.
So he was interested before he did this, for sure.
Yeah. But his student work is very much like most student work. I mean, this obviously came out as a result of a real crisis in his life, an extraordinary circumstance, and his somehow having the ability, in his own creative self, to make something great of it, both with his abilities as a writer, his abilities as a composer, and then of course all these amazing image gathering abilities that he has.
What happened to him, actually?
You know, I wish I knew. I've talked to him on the phone, so he's okay now. This happened, I think, a couple years ago, something like that, yeah.
Has he promoted this somehow to like get to spots people need to
He
see?
sent it to some film festivals, which is how I saw it. You know, I saw it in the North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina Film Festival. And, I mean, this is sort of a sidelight, but he had sent it to maybe 10 film festivals, and every single one of them rejected it and didn't even give it anything. And then we gave it the top prize because we thought it was so amazing. And then it showed up in the New York Film Festival, which means it's at least by those folks considered one of the top works in the whole country. And he's totally amazed. When I called him, I had the luck to get the call to say, you won a prize at our festival. He just about dropped the telephone. Because he's this like 26-year-old young guy. And this is something he made just on his own. Anyway, did it make you uncomfortable at times?
Yes, very.
Made you real uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Some people did. See, I think, you know, it's scary a little bit, isn't it? I mean, it's really on the edge of being like you can't quite watch it at times, or you don't want to quite listen to it. You wish it would stop for a minute. I don't know if you found yourself also having any kind of emotional reactions to the last piece, If It Bleeds, It Leads. If you found yourself emotionally challenged by that too at times. Not some people yes, some people no. I do. I mean, by the time you see that, for me, I always cry. When you finally see that story in its full context, and you see the woman screaming, and you see the little girl being pulled out from the lake and so forth, that I have a very strong emotional reaction to that, which I think is, I mean, which I wouldn't have had, I don't think, as much if I hadn't been put in the position of thinking about it by the makers. I'm just raising this because often an element in good work, good documentary work, is producing a strong reaction on the part of the audience, right? A strong reaction emotionally, a strong reaction intellectually, a strong reaction, something they want to talk about, they have to deal with. I mean, some of these images, I can tell you, having seen this, will stay with you. The image of the guy with the, and even the blender, you know, the blender image, that little finger with the screaming voice. You know, part of why this is so effective, I don't know if you noticed, is that it becomes more and more layered and more intense as it goes along. Yeah.
Actually, as a writer,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
As a writer, I found myself listening a lot more to the writing.
The text,
It was
yeah.
quite extraordinary. And what was interesting was he uses, first of all, there's a couple of things that came out. First of all, he's very clearly a product of the TV generation. And if you hadn't watched TV, you wouldn't be able to follow this along as much at all. But his images and his similes were so beautiful, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the video images that you were seeing, and yet it worked anyway. And I think it's interesting because you said, you know, you would remember those images. I remember his similes, and that's what I'll take away. And this piece is, I mean, he's such a beautiful writer that it could easily have just stand alone as an essay without any of the video, and the video just adds an extra
Yeah.
layer to it.
Yeah.
But as a piece of writing, it's
beautiful, yeah.
so strong.
Well, that's one reason I wanted to show it to you, is I want to sort of throw you off a little bit with this piece as to what documentary is all about. And I do see this, I mean, it's an experimental documentary, but something we often neglect, you know, those of us who are image gatherers, is just beautiful writing, clear, beautiful, expressive writing. And, you know, I want this, I mean, I wish I could show you a lot more, but this sort of stands as an example of the power of just, of writing in our work. Yeah.
One thing I really noticed too with that is she started to point out, every one of us in this room have had different experiences, and it has so many different, it could affect every single one of us in a totally different way.
Yeah, which is nice, it's
that's what I
open
wrote.
in that way, yeah. And he never actually, it's not like you exactly get the full story, he doesn't actually exactly tell you how this happened, or, you know, where he is, or, you know, it doesn't do the things you normally expect of documentaries. Well, on December 31st, I was walking down the street in Philadelphia, and it was a dark night, and somebody came out. I don't actually know what happened. He could have fallen off his bicycle, he could have, I don't know. And it ultimately is not important to getting at what this piece is about, right? It's just like a lot of times with good writing, I mean, whether it's script writing or documentary writing, and I'll probably bring this point up again later, but very often you want to jump right into the heart of it. You know, often don't need as much lead up. People don't, we're very media hip, you know, we don't need as much lead up and context as sometimes we, the makers, think that audiences do. It's always good so we say in fiction, it's always good in a scene to get into the scene as late as possible and to get out of it as early as possible, right? You don't need to see the person walking through the door, saying hi, sitting down and picking up their cup of coffee. You can start right out with what they're talking about, right? Simple example. Same thing with documentary. You can cut right to the heart of it. I mean, what is the first line in this? Do you remember? He starts right out by, I mean, I remember because I've heard this a few times. They don't give you blankets in the emergency room. He doesn't say, well, a horrible thing happened to me, or 2 years ago, da-da-da-da, or I'm a guy of 25 years old. I mean, he doesn't say any of that stuff. He just comes right in on the middle of the experience. They don't give you blankets in the emergency room, right? So think about that when you're creating your work. You know, don't waste time. Just get into the heart of it, okay?
That's a good opening line.
Yeah.
You want to know more.
You want to, exactly. It sets up a mystery, which is another great key. So we're going to just in a minute get talking about what makes a good documentary. But, and I want you to be thinking about that because it's going to be a topic I'm going to gather from all of you guys. But what I'm going to do is, over the course of the next 2-3 hours, is go through an entire outline of how, at least from my own experience, how documentaries are produced. Okay, starting from the idea, going all the way through to the final mix. And going through a whole number of skills that I think of as the particular skills of documentary makers. Now, of course, some of the skills of documentary makers are technical skills. You know, good camera, good lighting, good sound, clean edits, clean music recording, all that stuff. But I think more important are much more important skills are conceptual skills and are personal skills. So I thought I would kind of start by just, let's see, this will be a new experience.
Oh, no.
What is this? This is cool.
Keeps the chalk off your fingers.
That's great.
Save the chalk.
That's great. I've never seen one of these before. Okay, so some of the sort of the building blocks in terms of skills of making documentaries. And I tend to break them down first into 3 big blocks. One are what I call the investigative skills. My handwriting is terrible, but I'm going to write anyway. And hopefully this will help you remember what I'm talking about. Investigating, or just gathering skills. The second being the skills of analysis. And the third being what I call the skills of communicating. I sometimes refer to this as like telling a story. Okay. So what do I mean when I talk about investigating and gathering skills? I'll just give you a few that I think of as real basic. I think it's important that we acknowledge, those of us who are makers, that we have these skills so we can better hone them, that we actually do use these skills. Because sometimes we don't actually name the things that we do. For instance, how many of you in making documentaries think about the fact that a big part of a big skill that you have and a big part of what you do is observation, right? It's just astute, clear observation. That's an important documentary skill. With my own students, I spend a whole week just on observation. That's the number one thing we do, because I think that's in a way a base for the most important skills of documentary. The acute, clear observation of reality. So, that's one of your most important investigation skills, right? Another one is, it's actually you could call it a research skill, actually. I use, for lack of a better word, I also talk about research as another investigative skill. That is to say, when I talk about I usually mean going to magazines, books, experts of one kind or another, more traditionally thought of as research. Okay. So investigating, gathering. What can you think of as another investigation skill that documentarians use?
Talking and listening.
Yeah, well, listening, yeah, I think of that as part of it, but maybe you're saying interviewing, asking questions. So interviewing is definitely, and we can get to, I want to talk about interviewing in more detail a little later. So I think of that as a real important skill that we can hone and make better. Yeah.
I'm not sure where it belongs, but trying to figure out what you're trying to do and what the important question is in your whole project.
Yeah.
I think it's, I don't know, are these in order? Because
a little bit, yeah. It's not that necessarily, these are sort of like skill levels kind of things. When we go to the outline, the very first piece of the outline is the idea itself. So I think that's what you're speaking to.
yeah, it kind of goes along the way too.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway.
What about just relating skills, being able to relate to
the
people, the situation, and the...
Yeah, getting access to tough situations, talking your way into a tough situation, yeah. We could think of that as access or social skills, be able to get access, having good social skills. What's that? Uh-oh.
I think there's a very important component that involves the ability to make a decision very rapidly and for lack of a better word, to push yourself into the situation where you have to be, to not hesitate. I think that's critical.
Courage?
Whatever you want to call it, you know.
I'll go for that, yeah. I never thought of putting that one on here, but maybe there's a better word.
Yeah.
Intuition.
You know what I mean.
Tenacity? What?
Intuition.
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, intuition, of course. Yeah, that sort of goes behind all this. We'll put down chutzpah. I don't know how to spell chutzpah. C-H, yeah. Chutzpah, okay. Now, skills of analysis, just to go over this kind of quickly, is your ability to select from all this stuff you've gathered and researched, right? The ability to select what's most important, to begin to select what's most important. So I think of selecting. These are your sort of synthesizing skills, right? Selecting. I mean, the process of logging your interviews. If you don't know what that is, we're going to talk about that. Is using your selecting skill. Beginning to create a structure. Structure being, next to a really good idea. I think the next most important key to making a good piece, your structure. Skills of communicating kind of begin here and keep going. Solving your problems. In other words, when you end up, you make your structure and you have some idea of how it's going to go. Of course, there are always things that don't work, right? Being able to figure out, well, how do I make this transition? I've got this piece and I've got that piece, but they don't really quite fit together. So solving your problems. Or also, I think of that as filling holes sometimes. Beginning to know how to tell a story. Writing, big one. Writing, whether it's narration, whatever it is. Okay. Looking for what's your beginning, middle, and end. I guess that's part of storytelling. Right? Polishing, right? Not polishing, polishing. Polishing. In other words, making it beautiful, making it poetry, making it sing. It goes beyond just having the information in the right order. Right? Neither of these pieces would be as good if they weren't just every cut wasn't perfect, and every sound mix wasn't just right where it should be. Every bit of music didn't come in just at the right moment. This is a real skill that you can develop. And one of the most important ways to develop this, I think, is through testing your piece with your peers and with just regular folks. I'm a great believer in testing. Getting a bunch of people together to sit in a dark room and look at what you've done.
So what are you asking when you're testing? Because usually it's like,
Oh,
that
that
was really nice.
Yeah. First of all, we're getting off in testing here, but I think the most important effect of testing is on you. You sitting with 10 people and seeing how you feel about it, and seeing when their butts start to get wiggly and when they sort of are staring around. But really a lot how you feel about it, because I think you, a lot of times, monitor yourself and think, well, that's really long, or that's not really proven, that fact that I just threw out there, or that narration is not really at all clear. I think it's very important when you're testing to tell people ahead of time that what you don't want to hear is, that was nice, good job. You do not want to hear that. You have to be extremely clear, because people want to be supportive, especially if they're your friend and they know all the crap you've gone through to make things. But that is not helpful for them to say that, to pat you on the back. That's not what you want.
Your peers might not be that helpful either.
Well, showing it to peers who are makers, who you respect their skills, that's one kind of testing to do, who can perhaps help you solve your problems. Another kind of testing, which I think is, for me, is probably a little more valuable, is showing it to just folks who are kind of your audience. People on the street, if it's aimed at teachers, showing it to some teachers. If it's aimed at high school kids, showing it to high school kids. And just honestly getting their reaction. I usually try to make a whole list of questions I want to ask people. Anything that I'm worried about, things aren't clear, it's too slow, whether the jokes, I make a whole list and I make sure to ask, I make sure to keep telling you, I want you to tell me the truth. I don't want you to just reassure me, that's not helpful. So I at least do two kinds of testing. You know, sort of peers, makers whose work I respect, and who I know will be straight with me. And I don't know about you, but I have my little group of people, around the country actually. I have my 5 or 6 people who I utterly trust and I know will be straight with me, and I make sure my work gets to them. And they're all over the place. And I think they're just so valuable, and I do the same for them. And it's not a bad idea to start to develop a group like that here for yourself, or a few people who you can check things out with. Yes?
I have a question about testing, and it's
Yeah.
about a specific kind of a test that I did, and I wonder if it's the time to ask it now or later.
What? Go ahead. Well, if it's specific, maybe later.
Okay.
I actually didn't intend to get off on testing. I just wanted to give you just a sense of sometimes it's important, again, to name the things that we do. Okay, we're going to keep right on going here. We're going to start the outline. What's that?
You have to spit on that blackboard. Oh, come on.
Well, yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, keep it.
It's so windy.
We're bringing out a new blackboard now.
Bringing out a new blackboard?
No, we're gonna get something we need.
Okay. Good. So, I'm going to pull out my trusty outline here. This outline's going to have is sort of, I call it the Reichert method of making documentaries. It's kind of a tried and true method. I think of it as sort of a block method. It's very methodical. Oh, so you think you can do better, huh? Very methodical, and it will produce, I mean, generally speaking, it does produce pretty good results. It's not the only way to approach creating and editing a piece, I'll tell you that, but it's a way that works, and Lisa and I can talk about. Okay. Obviously, the purpose of editing a piece, of structuring a piece, is to reveal your ideas, right, in a logical fashion, to make your case, to tell a story, right? What you're oftentimes doing is basically telling a story. Has a beginning, middle, and end, has some kind of setup of the story, has some kind of conflict that arises, some kind of mystery that is put forward that needs to be solved, takes you through usually several hurdles that have to be leaped, and then draws a conclusion that's satisfying, draws us to a conclusion that's satisfying in one way or other. I don't mean to say that it pacifies us, but it's satisfying. I don't think the end of If It Bleeds, It Leads is comfortable, but I think it's a great ending. Right? It's a great conclusion. Same with the other one. The story about what it feels like to be on July 4th and be very tired and a little kid and all that. That really draws that whole piece to a beautiful conclusion. Okay. And everything about what you do, where you position each shot, where you position each sound block, each sound bite, where you position each block, creates more than the individual pieces, obviously. And every decision has to be made totally carefully and thoughtfully. What I don't want you to do is to have editing that's kind of ambivalent about where it's going, that's sort of unclear, that seems unintentional. You don't really know, if you really stopped and thought about it, you don't know why piece A would be before piece B. That's not good editing. You know, you don't know really why things are the way they are. I mean, the maker doesn't know, and then the audience doesn't know. That's not good editing. I hope you will never let mistakes go by, things like bad sound levels, bad edits, camera work that sucks, you know. Don't use that stuff. Just don't use it, you know. If you're on a level of really really producing now, you need to have respect for your audience, right? And so don't let your mistakes in there. Oh boy, this is great. I'm trying to vamp for a while here. Take pride in your work, I think, it's very important. Okay. Oh, this is so good. Get a little more juice here while we're waiting. All set? Okay, so this goes through maybe, I don't know, 10 steps, something like that. So step number 1 is, yeah, well, I can do this. It's your idea, right? Figuring out what's your idea. And refining that. Figuring out what's a good idea. Someone came up with an idea while we were here. Someone said she wants to do a piece about Italian internment during World War II. Right? That's her idea. That's a strong idea. We only have to hear 4 or 5 words, and we know that's a strong idea. I mean, we'll then want to know, well, how's she going to tell this? Are there people she can talk to? Is there archival footage? What really happened, you know, and so forth. But that's a really great idea. So I'd like to talk to you, before we get into what do you do with your idea, a little bit about what actually makes a good documentary idea. Right, something to think about. What you think about the great documentaries you've seen. What kind of elements can make a great documentary idea?
Controversy.
Right, okay.
Urgency.
Urgency, possibly, yeah.
Revelation, I mean, being given information that you thought was one way, but you find out
Yeah.
another side.
Right, revealing something particularly that we, as a people, let's say, maybe don't know much about. I guess what you're saying is perhaps there's perhaps a mystery that you can reveal the truth behind it.
Or what I'm thinking of right now is the Atomic Cafe.
Oh, right.
That's going through my head, you know.
Yeah.
All the duck and cover shit that we went through as
Right.
kids, and then all of a sudden it comes from another point of view. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of revelation.
Yeah. What else?
Human side.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make it relevant.
I didn't hear that.
A human side. That's often, even if the story is technical or is abstract, it's often very helpful to have a human side. I would go further and even say good characters. Right? In a documentary, it's great if you have, who's ever seen the film Best Boy? One person. You gotta get this film. It's one of the great documentaries of all time. It's kind of partly cinema verite, direct cinema, and partly has interviews. It's about a family, really. 52-year-old retarded man named Philly. Does this sound at all familiar? Anyway, you think, when you hear that subject, you think, do I want to spend an hour and a half with this person? It's one of the most amazing films you'd ever want to see. Because, as it turns out, Philly is a great character. And the family it's like an onion being peeled. You gradually get closer and closer to the heart of this family, his aging parents, right, who were in their 70s and 80s, who have taken care of Philly their whole life. Best Boy. It was one of those documentaries that actually did win the Oscar and deserved to win the Oscar. So, great characters. What else? I want you to be thinking about your own ideas. I know, I wish we would have had time to hear all 40 of your ideas right now, but unfortunately we didn't. To think about whether you're on the trail of a great idea.
It must hit the pulse, it's got to tap into the pulse to grab them.
I mean, what people
Yeah.
are interested in. Well, you're thinking of documentaries, some of you are thinking of documentaries that are kind of about current events, kind of public affairs things, right?
I'm thinking more of, life and death, the things that really strike us.
Yeah. Life and death, great subject matter, right? If you think about it. I mean, both of these two pieces dealt with life and death, actually. One of them criticized dealing with life and death, but it does deal with life and death at the same time. And Glassjaw also. In a way, Best Boy does. There were a whole series of films done about birth and death. People who have cancer, people who have AIDS. I mean, birth and death, life and death. Gripping stuff, drama. Drama is a big word, I would say. Somebody said conflict, character development, drama. Think about what is the inherent drama in your subject. It's got to be there. Yes?
I think using our own life experiences a lot too. Because then you can really put a lot of emotion and energy into it.
Yeah, I think it's often a very important element, often overlooked. The documentarian's own experience, own voice. That's actually coming to be kind of on the cutting edge of documentary these days. Documentary is a form that evolves just like every other art form. It evolves kind of quickly. And recently, with films like Roger and Me, Sherman's March, probably others I can't think of right now, this film is a good example. The documentarian as a protagonist, as a character in the piece, is becoming more and more accepted. I mean, this is like the polar opposite to the view of the folks who created the mode we call cinema verite or direct cinema. You know what that is? You be the fly on the wall. Documentarian is fly on the wall, observing all, but in no way, or trying as little possible to affect what's going on. You never ask a question. You never hear a word of narration. You never insert yourself in a situation. Well, we've come totally the other way now. The point where we have Roger and Me, I think a very, very interesting documentary where really one of the main protagonists is the filmmaker. The story's about him, right? So yes, I agree with you. It's good. Yes?
I think it's important to raise maybe more questions than you answer and to force the viewer to question his own integrity and morality, and maybe to leave to look at the ambiguity of some things and not to try and make everything
sewn up and answered. Yeah.
So that at the end, your viewer still isn't sure where his feelings lie.
Anything else you think of as important elements? I think that's a good element. I think that's part of respecting the audience. Is that I kind of feel my own point of view on that is that in my own work is that on the one hand, if I'm a documentarian spending 3-4 years or whatever on a subject, or 3 or 4 months on a subject, and I've really investigated and I've really checked it out, and I've really stood in the shoes of all positions, which I think you must do as a good documentarian. You have to have a point of view, I think, but you also need to stand as firmly in the shoes of the people you're against as the people you're for. I think that's really important to make good work, right? And something people who make advocacy work don't do often enough, I think. And I think sometimes the work suffers because it seems so clearly one-sided that people don't buy it. You have to be able to know exactly the arguments of the opposite points of view and be able to take them on better, too. If you don't know their arguments really well and express them, you can't take them on. But I feel as though, in the end, it's a responsibility you have to your audience to tell them your point of view, to somehow let them know, either through narration or through how you've edited it or through a scene that reveals something important. Because, I mean, after all, you have done a lot of work and thought about something that presumably people care about. You owe it to them to deliver some wisdom. Now, it's not the same thing as tying everything up in a neat little package, right? So I think it's also great to respect the audience enough to let them think about the issues in their own way. I think both of these films do that. So I kind of feel both ways, that both are important. Does that make sense? Like having a point of view and also not dotting every I and answering every question. Let's see, life or death, revealing characters. I'm looking to see what I wrote down. Passion. I wrote down the word passion. I mean, why do people make documentaries? You know, it's not exactly out of, well, we're going to make lots of money, it's going to get us lots of status in the community. You know, it's not...
should be interested in the subject.
You should love this, you should be passionate about the subject, or else you maybe shouldn't be doing it. Now, you should have something you should find within yourself what you are passionate about. Why are you doing this? Biggest question at the beginning, talking about your idea. Why do you want to do it? It's not just like a nice way to pass the time. Well, that's fine, but that's not going to make great work. Great works that you see, good works that you see, are products of the passion on the part of the maker. And sometimes you have to dig down, and you know it's there, you know you're interested, you don't know quite why. And that's, either you figure it out ahead of time, or that's something you discover as you go along. Passion. Roger and Me, full of passion. Barbara Koppel's films, American Dream, Harlan County, USA, full of passion. Leaps off the screen. You have to watch these films. This film, both of these films, I think, are, I mean, the first one is kind of calm and measured, but there's a lot of passion to it. All the films I'm going to show today, I think, have that. Find it in yourself. Find it in your subject. Sometimes I like documentaries that reveal to us the underside of the familiar, stuff we see every single day, right? But looking at the underside of it. A film like Streetwise, some of you might have seen, which is about homeless kids in Seattle. Street kids, you know, the kind of kids who you would, I don't know, here specifically, but certainly where I come from, in many places, there are kids who are runaways, who you see them horsing around in the streets, you see them manhandling, you sort of pass by and don't really think about them. Well, this takes you for 90 minutes into their world. And it's a fascinating film. It's also available at video stores. Streetwise, very good film to see. You know, the underside of the familiar. A lot of Fred Wiseman's films, the documentarian Fred Wiseman, who's probably the preeminent cinema verite maker. Yeah, I would say he is. He makes films like he made a film about a store, a hospital, a high school, the canal zone, which was so boring, I can't tell you. 3 hours watching ships go back and forth. Most of them are quite kind of fascinating, though. And he examines American institutions. And again, I'm going to give you probably by the end of the day have a little list of documentaries to go out and see. I would try to see high school if you can, or see, oh gosh. He made one which is really chilling about the experiments on animals, a place that does experiments, Primate. Really worth seeing. Hard to watch. He just lets people do what they do. Doesn't ask them any questions, shoots hours and hours and days and days. The underside of sort of things that are right around us can be fascinating stuff. I mean, we all know about the exotic, right? National Geographic goes off and does islanders and, you know, Bora Bora and, you know, strange animals and so forth, which is all interesting, but it doesn't, you know, documentary can also be about stuff that happens right on our block, right in our neighborhood. Great stuff to be made there. Okay, so here you have your idea. I hope you're sort of thinking about an idea right now. What I always suggest people do is do some work on paper first. A lot of work on paper. Write your idea down. Why do you want to do it? I always think that's number one, why do you want to do it? And write about that. Spend a page or so and write about that. All kinds of reasons, personal reasons, political reasons, that would be fun. You get to meet some interesting people. I don't know what your reason is. Something in your own history, your parents' history, write it down. And maybe begin to think about, well, what could be the story here? What is actually the story? Not just the subject, but the story. What do you want to say about it? Write about that. And what elements do you kind of see in that whole palette we talked about before, right, of the documentarian's palette, right? You know, music, interviews, actualities, history, archival footage, photographs, all kinds of things you can draw from, right? As you make your doc. What are the elements that you see are present, you know, to talk about this idea, to tell this story? Now, I'm not saying you're going to lock yourself in here. I'm not saying this is not going to be refined, that this is it. You've written your page and that's it, you got it. No. But this is a starting point. I don't necessarily suggest people do what I call a formal treatment at this point. You know, the piece will open with shots of so-and-so. Then a narrator will say so-and-so. It's not the time for that. No, it is a time for just sort of thinking about why you're doing it, what's your connection to it, and what's it going to maybe look like. This is going to change. This will help you keep focus. So you've got your idea. Then, remember I said to think about what elements you will need to tell your story. What elements you will need to solve the mystery, right? What are your investigative elements? You begin to gather. After you get your idea and you write about it, you begin your process of gathering. Gather, I guess I should say. Gather. Oh no. Oh darn. That screwed screwed up. Okay, forget that. It's just gather, okay. Gather, okay. This might be, you might hit the library, depending on the subject. You know, you might hit the library for something that's an issue or that has that component to it. You might do some research. You might want to find out, well, what is the common opinion about this subject right now? You talked about doing something about teenagers. I don't know, what is your actual subject beyond just teenagers?
Changing the community's view of teenagers. That it's not necessarily they have something wrong with them, but it's how the community treats them.
Mm-hmm.
And getting their point of view on issues and things that affect them.
And you said you do environmental kind of work, right? Like what might be an idea you have right now?
Right now I'm thinking of using the water that's evaporating on there as a means of illustrating something that actually happens in the physical and chemical world, so that can be used as a tool. But I mean a specific project?
Yeah, a project, yeah.
Cancer Alley in Louisiana, the footage I have of that.
You have footage already?
Right.
Did you shoot it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
did you just go down there and shoot it, or did you research first?
I researched it for a year and a half, not specifically, but it just came, flowing in as part of the work.
Right.
So, yeah.
Great. Okay, so you're pretty far into that project. I don't know if anyone is just sort of in the idea stage of something. Yours is in the idea stage. Well, anyway, think about whether it has a research component. And there's various kinds. You can do expert research, go to a university professor, read the 3 big books on the subject. You can do sort of more, what's the popular thinking about the subject. Then you go to like Time magazine or Newsweek or that sort of level of things. What are people thinking about it right now? Anyway, so you do some research. Then you can, perhaps interviews are part of this. Okay, so you go out and start doing your interviews. We're going to talk a little bit more about interviewing in a minute. You can start thinking, maybe start taking some actualities if that's part of it. Start shooting in the situation. You talked about Cancer Alley. I'm sure that wasn't just interviews. That was sort of looking at stuff too.
Right.
Right. Yours is probably going to have quite a lot of actuality. Not again. So you start to shoot.
Julie, on research, I want to elaborate.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
When I went down there, I knew where I was going and who I would talk to.
Right.
I had a couple contacts.
Right.
But as the thing evolved, like you mentioned earlier, one person said go over here, another person said go over here, and pretty soon I had more shots than more places than I could possibly go in a marvelous. It just boom, it happened. Right. So. That's the way it is. That's that whole thing of your journey, but then you get off the map and it gets really interesting then usually. And I think it's good to follow the leads. I mean, you have to use your judgment. Is this really too far outside? But you don't want to be straitjacketed by sort of your initial idea. Okay, so you start to do all this gathering. Now, let me talk to you a little bit more about interviewing. Let me get my interviewing file out here. Here we go. I'm going to just sort of stop right here and now. I think it's one of these sometimes neglected skills is doing good interviews, both visually and in terms of how you relate to the person. So I want to just talk for a few minutes about this. The goal, obviously, in doing interviews is to get personal, lively, truthful material, right? The people you're talking to need to feel confident. They need to feel like you actually are listening to them, right? That you actually care about what they're saying. So what would this tell you should avoid as an interviewer? Some of the common mistakes of interviewers.
Giving your point of view.
Actually, I think it's fine to get into arguments with people.
Well, I don't know how to say what I mean, except that not to push your point of view. What you're trying to do is get from them what they feel.
That's true, yeah. There are times when you still want to reveal what you feel. That will actually make a person comfortable, or it could actually get a person to get more engaged. Because you want people to be engaged. You don't want them to be just saying blah, 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 something they've said a million times before. They just sort of sit back in their chair. We've all seen interviews like that. Utterly boring, especially with any kind of public officials, any kind of experts, doctors, professors. They've said this shit before, and they just say it, and it is flat boring. That's when you get in and argue with them. That's when you get in and start interrupting them. and start saying, isn't it true that? And I have read studies that show that contradict directly what they're saying. And then they'll sit up in their seat and their eyes will start to spark and they'll start to speak in a real way, not speaking to the camera, right? But really arguing, really talking to you, really defending themselves. But I'm going, that's a subtle point. I'm going to the even simpler points of what do you avoid if you want to get.
Well, your goal is to, you want to hear them, you don't want to make them listen to you. I mean, you might talk to them, you might try to challenge them to do something, but you're not trying to impress them.
Right, no, you're definitely not trying to impress them. You're trying to get, this is their time to shine. You go in there with that point of view, you're trying to make them comfortable. You want them to be their best. Not so important you be your best. I know everybody, usually most people are in their own head, and they're so nervous about the tech, and they're so nervous about their questions that that's all they're thinking about. And they are not thinking about how the other person's feeling. And that's who's the important one in this case. But what are some other things that you should try to avoid? Anthony, you can think of. Do you have your hand up?
Well, I'm not sure how it fits in, but sometimes I'm the interviewer and the camera person at the same
right,
time.
Which is hard. Yeah.
And half my brain is working about
right.
this, and I'm not really listening. I'm having a hard time listening to it. And so they don't know whether to look at the camera or look at me.
Yeah. What do you think you should do about that?
Well, it's nice if I can take somebody else.
Set the camera on a tripod.
Well, yeah, sit right by it so they're looking at you.
Yeah. If you really don't have anyone to help you, and I totally advise if you can at all have a person to help you take the sound, use a separate mic. I mean, that's extremely important. You don't just rely on the mic on the camera. That's never going to produce an adequate sound. So you sort of automatically are often in a situation where you need another person. I don't think it's good to have people talking to the camera. I know I find that horribly disconcerting, and I'm really used to being interviewed when somebody is, all I'm looking at is this black box. I think that's very dehumanizing. Set it on a tripod, start it up, and if you have to, you know, nice little sort of medium shot so the person can move around a little bit and talk to them. If you have to glance in every now and then, okay. But I would say if you're doing serious documentary work, you don't generally want to go out with a one-person crew.
Right.
I don't know how you guys feel about this, but this is my advice, okay? And do use a separate mic. I was actually thinking more along the lines of, in terms of helping to inspire confidence, helping to make the person feel confident and listen to, is that you never want to hide behind the tech. You know, you don't want to arrive and say, you know, hi, where should I set up? Where's the plug? You know, sort of, you know what I mean? Like what we're really here for is to get something on the tape. That's the totally wrong message to give your interview subjects, right? We're only here because it's the tape. We're here because I am interested in you. We share an interest in a subject, and I want to know what you think about it. Or whatever it is, whatever is the why of your idea should guide you in going in and talking with somebody. You're there because you're interested in them. You're not there just to get something on tape. You shouldn't hide behind your list of questions, which my students do this all the time. Big, long list of questions, and they you know, they just sort of go right down the list, don't even make eye contact with the folks. They're just in their list of questions. That's also not relating to the person. To me, good interviews are the result of relationships.
Yep.
They're conversations. They may be sort of one-sided conversations, you know, because as you said, they're supposed to do most of the talking. But they're a result of a relationship, hopefully a good, friendly relationship, a positive relationship, an interesting relationship. Maybe that's the key word, an interesting relationship. You want to interest the person. You want to engage the person. You want them to know why you're there, why you care about them, right?
I think one thing that goes back to why your research is so important before everything else is if you go into an interview with a person and they know you haven't done any research about them,
right.
They can tell if you truly, you know something about them and you're truly, you know, there to really know them, or if you're just there because you were, you know, thought they'd be a good thing to have.
Yeah, it's kind of insulting. I mean, we probably all had that happen to us when somebody sets up to do an interview with you and they don't have really any idea, you know, about you. Anyway, so another, let's see, little. I always do suggest that you prepare questions in advance. I mean, I always do anyway. I always, you know, write down. My own personal method is that I write tons, all kinds of questions. Then I order the questions. Well, what would be logically first? Then what? Then what? If they're tough questions, ones I know they're going to want to avoid, or it's going to be sticky, it's going to get uncomfortable. Obviously, I don't start with those. I don't anyway. I usually actually write 2 or 3 what I call warm-up questions that I sort of don't really care that much about the answer. just to get the person relaxed, because it inevitably takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes for the person to relax in front of the camera. Sometimes it takes even quite a bit longer than that. But I'll try to talk about something that just happened, or something about the day that we're at, or something about their work, showing an interest in them. How was your day so far? Oh, I heard that you, whatever, whatever. You know, something that just sort of engages them, shows them interest, that you're interested in them, and gets them to relax a little bit. Warm-up questions, then sort of the little bit easier, more lead-in questions. If I have any tough ones, I usually wait. Yes?
I've had dilemmas in the past where I've gone in with my camera person, and while that's being set up, while the interview's being set up, we're already talking about what we're excited about and the passion.
Right.
And then when the interview begins and I go back to ask the questions that we just talked about, they look very puzzled, and they're like, well, we just talked about that, Mary. Like, that's no fun. The fire's gone from that moment.
That's a really good point.
I don't know sometimes I don't know how to finesse that moment, of, let's see, how's the weather? It's like how to,
That's part of the social skills that we had on the Blackboard before. I think just the fact that you have brought it up will help raise everyone's awareness, and probably your own too. I would say you don't want to get into the good stuff before the tape is rolling. You don't, but you don't want to seem to be doing that.
That's right.
So usually you ask questions that are sort of around the subject, but not actually at the heart of it, or you bring up other stuff, like maybe you talk a little bit about what you've been up to. And maybe they'll then talk about what they've been up to while the room is getting set up or whatever. But yeah, it's especially on the same day, it's very hard to get somebody to be good again. I find, this is a little tip, however, when we're making Seeing Red, which is a big documentary about American communists, we often talk to a person, did an initial interview, and then maybe several months later, we would go back. And then it was not a problem. It seemed to be people sort of forgot what we talked about, and we could get right back into it.
Do you have a technique for getting people who are reluctant to be interviewed to agree to be interviewed?
To agree at all? It depends on the person. Are you thinking of a specific case?
Well, I've approached this a number of times in my work as a journalist, but as some of these Italian attorneys, they don't want to do it if that other guy isn't going to do it. And I'm sort of pushing, but I don't want to push too hard. I'm sort of being as charming as possible, but I'm always curious to hear, journalists know the technique for getting the mother of the dead kid to talk. Like, you're the only person who could tell the story.
Just like this, yeah.
Right. There's all kinds of lies.
I usually I don't know. Maybe this is me. I tend to be a very direct person, and I usually just say why I want, why it's important to me to hear from them, and then perhaps why they are particularly good. If there's, like, in terms of communists, they know there's thousands of communists. Why me? I can talk about why a film on the Communist Party would be important. Sometimes flattery, or sometimes just being real honest. Well, you have had an experience in this particular industry that I actually haven't found anyone else who can talk about as articulately as you do. And you were, in fact, a leader of a strike, and you're the only one I know who was. And we have great material, photographs of you. Whatever. I try to be. I actually try to go for being honest, but yet maybe there's a little edge of flattery. It's good to find out why. You can just ask somebody, why are you reluctant? Why are you reluctant? And then they'll tell you, hopefully, and maybe that will be the key to what to say next or what to do next. Sometimes you back off initially. Well, let's talk about it again. You don't have to decide right now. Can I call you back in a couple of days? If you really feel there's going to be a no any second, that's sometimes the way to go. Yes?
And you have one other option, too, is you can say, well, can I audio record you?
Sure.
Sort of videotape you, and then you can use either archival footage or cover footage.
I'm glad you said that, yeah.
Also helpful.
We did that a lot. And then often if people are audio recorded, then they are willing later to be video recorded because they see what you're going for, and it's not that bad, and so forth, yeah.
I think people think they don't have anything to say, and if you get them talking about that issue, and they start talking to you on a one-on-one level, then you can say, see, you have all this to say.
Yeah, very often it's simply that people don't think they have anything to say. You're absolutely right. Especially I find this with women and people of color very often feel, because, they are one down in the society, feel like they don't have anything to offer. Or they won't be articulate. They won't be concise. But ask them. If that's the response, then you can tell them why you're interested in them on that level. You had a point.
I'd like to answer Mary's question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a very good idea to be able to have the camera completely under your control and be completely in control of your equipment and your cord so that you can get in, like a fisherman, so to speak, very quietly and set it up and be unobtrusive.
Mhm.
The tally light, I think, should be off, or covered with a piece of tape.
Cover it, yeah.
And turn the camera on and begin your interview, and leave the camera running after the interview is over, because
Right.
frequently the beginning and the end
Absolutely.
is where you get it.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, if I'm interviewing a black guy down south who can move very quickly, I'm gonna make sure that all those cords are snapped in place. There's gonna be kind of